The Get On Living Safely campaign is sponsoring this podcast to remind you to keep your spending in the community. Supporting local businesses keeps food on the table for our friends and neighbors. Follow them on social media and learn more at getonlivingsafely.com. We chat with avid outdoorsman Chris West. We talk about early exposure to the outdoors, conservation, whitetail deer and venison resources, and more. Chris shares advice for those learning how to integrate the natural world as a food resource and why our food is so disconnected from us. You can find more conversations on our website, lacrosselocal.com. I'm Amy.
And I'm Brent.
And this is Lacrosse Local.
My name is Chris West. I was born in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and pretty much have lived in the surrounding area most of my life. Did get a bigger appreciation, I should say, for the driftless area, having done quite a bit of travel at one point in my career. And each time I'd be flying back into the area, just having a fuller appreciation for what this area in particular offers for somebody who's big into the outdoors like I am. How I got into the outdoors is a blend. I wouldn't say I was overly exposed to the outdoors as a kid, but I had a good mix of exposure, and I was a pretty independent kid myself. But my mom was actually probably the biggest driver in the outdoors, just given her enthusiasm for being an early morning person, and opportunities to bond with her as a kid involved quite a bit of fishing. I had a La Crosse Tribune paper out when I was a kid, and she'd be up at 4 a.m. She'd have her coffee. She'd be rolling papers for me before my route. Oftentimes we'd end up getting some fishing in even before school or on the weekends. You know, my dad and stepdad were both, I'd say, casual gun deer hunters. I got to tag along since I was, 7 or 8 with them, and I was hooked at a young age, in particular on the deer hunting side of things.
So you've spoken on a number of topics ranging from conservation, whitetail deer and venison resources, shed antler hunting, trout fishing. What are you hoping to relay to audiences on these subjects?
You know, the topics can vary, obviously, and the audience as well. I guess it's multifaceted from my approach. What my objections are, first and foremost, I'm extremely passionate about the outdoors, extremely passionate about our community. And this community offers a lot for somebody who wants to take advantage of the outdoors and the resources. So I just like talking and sharing that passion in general. In terms of what I try to share also is I like to take an opportunity, and usually Open Q&A offers that, to eliminate any myths or misconceptions surrounding oftentimes wild game or the hunting industry as a whole, or some rogue story somebody heard from their uncle that lasted their whole lifetime, and it may or may not be true. So I like to open it up and just have conversation about hunting in general, what it means to me, and let the discussion flow in those forums. But also, there's something for everybody in the outdoors, and I think that gets lost. It's intimidating to get into anything new, and it takes work and skill, but with anything, you put a little bit of time, you improve, you learn, you grow. So I just like to put myself out there as somebody who's approachable, knowledgeable. I like to mentor others. I have adult friends who've gotten into hunting and fishing later on. But when you're talking like shed hunting, I mean, that doesn't require a whole lot of knowledge or skill. You learn it, and your success goes up when you know what you're doing. Morel mushroom hunting, trout fishing, just being able to identify flora and fauna, native and invasive. It really changes your mindset, I think, when you're out in the great out of doors, if you're thinking and seeing through a different lens.
On your Instagram, you have a quote there: humans have harvested and gathered longer than we've been going to grocery stores.
Yeah.
Why is our food so disconnected from us in some sense?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it puzzles me at times. I can think about it and think about it and think about it and come back to the same rationale, and sometimes I'm confused myself. I think a lot of it is societal from a lot of different angles. Just access to food and healthy food and costs of food and mass producing of food and For me, I couldn't fully and accurately describe how much it means to me to have the connection to the food that I and my family have. All I can say is that, I know where my food is coming from. Most of the meals that we're eating, we eat wild game several times a week. I know where that food came from. I know how it was handled and prepared. In a world that, on one hand is so accessible to fast food and preservatives and additives, and then on the other side of that coin, there's such a wave towards organic food. I mean, I can't think of a more organic diet than eating wild game, especially wild game that you've harvested yourself, and you know where that game came from and what they were eating and what conditions they were living in. And the whole process is such a connection for me. Like you said, my quote on my Instagram is, humans have harvested and gathered exponentially longer than we've been going to grocery stores. It's true. It's in our DNA. Whether we acknowledge it or feel it the same is up to the individual, but we got here as a human race from hunting and gathering, and we've become more proficient over thousands of years doing so, and we're actually in a regression, I would have to say, in terms of just the necessity to have those vital survival skills and necessity to harvest your own food and be prepared throughout the seasons of what type of diet you need to sustain. And I mean, it's just a much bigger piece of my life than I can really put into words. And I only hope to share the little bit of knowledge I do have and the fulfillment it gives me with those that are interested when opportunities present.
In the last, whatever it's been since March with COVID, outdoor recreation has just skyrocketed with people buying bikes for the first time. I know me personally, I've gone fishing more this last summer with my two sons and daughter than I ever did in my life. Probably hundreds of times we've gone fishing and we've actually cooked it and eaten it. For someone interested in learning how to integrate this food as a resource to them, what advice do you give to them to just kind of like slowly jump in? Might be overwhelming at first.
Exactly, and I think it is. It's intimidating, right? I think most people fall into a few categories. Either you were brought up in a household or had family or friends that were into hunting and fishing or gathering in some way, or you weren't. You were curious, and you fortunately found somebody along the way that was into it and exposed you a little more, or you went all in on your own. And in today's world, there's so much information that you have access to, from the simple act of how do you tie certain types of fishing knots, what should you be looking for depending on the body of water you're fishing in or where you're hunting, how do you field dress or clean fish or game. I mean, there's a lot of information, books and YouTube videos that are out there. So that's a huge plus. To your point, since the pandemic has hit, I'm in the same exact boat with I have two young kids, a girl and a boy. And my wife and I, we've taken those kids out fishing often. We drove down to Iowa, which is a place you can fish year-round for trout, which is kind of unique. And in 45 minutes, we caught our limit of rainbow trout, and we shared that with my parents-in-law the next day. And the kids ask and crave for fish now. They like the whole experience of picking apart a headless trout. I was a little gun-shy exposing them to that initially, and it's just amazing. It's a natural thing, and it's a connection to your food. And I guess if I was going to recommend anybody to certain resources, I would just do some research. There's a lot of good fact-based resources out there, and then there's a lot of figures that are big into conservation, like a Steven Ranella with Meat Eater, probably more known for his Netflix Meat Eater series, but he's a very knowledgeable and successful published author as well on wild game cookbooks. And he spoke in La Crosse a couple of years ago, and I had the opportunity to hear him speak. And it's powerful. He welcomes any questions from the audiences. Sometimes they're obviously geared to an anti-hunting type audience, some of the questions he fields, and he very eloquently speaks to what hunting and conservation means and us as a society. And with hunting numbers on the decline, I think it's more important now than ever to understand resources. And when you're talking about a COVID pandemic, food shortages and food insecurities, it's had me thinking in recent months of how I can get more involved with current venison donation programs. People don't realize how highly sustainable and available venison is, especially in our state and neighboring states. There's opportunity there to offer through donation programs food to people who really need it, healthy food and a sustainable resource. There's an abundance of venison. We need more hunters out there harvesting deer, and it just seems like the opportunity is there. And whether it's fishing or hunting, there's something for everyone, and it's for good reason.
So if people want to find out more about you, maybe an upcoming speaking engagement, hopefully in person, but probably on Zoom right now, what's the best avenue for them to follow along?
I'm pretty open. I would say a good way to reach me is just probably by Instagram. I have a public account, and it's geared more towards filming some of my outdoor experiences. It's more sharing what I'm seeing, and most of it's around this general area, whether it's hunting or fishing. And my Instagram is @OutdoorQuest, Outdoor CWEST. And, I get random questions from people about the techniques I'm using, where and when and how, and I'm always open to fielding questions or pointing people in the right direction as best as I can.
La Crosse Local Podcast is a production of River Travel Media. Do you have an interview idea you would like to share with us? Message us on Facebook @La Crosse Locals. Subscribe to the La Crosse Local Podcast on your favorite podcast app. If you like us, rate us 5 stars. We thank you for it.